Welcome to the Franchise Masters podcast, where aspiring entrepreneurs learn what it takes to find, buy, and build successful franchise businesses. My name is Drew Carpenito, and I'm your host as we dive into these fascinating behind-the-scenes stories of people who have used surprising franchises to create massive success. I'm glad you're here. Let's dig in. Welcome to the Franchise Masters podcast. I have the myth, the man, the legend, the wolf of franchises joining us. Did I say that right?
Yeah, you got it, Drew.
All right, cool. Glad to have you here, man. I've been following what you've been doing for the past, I think I kind of came in past like 3 months probably, but no, you've been at it for a while, man, and putting some pretty big content out there and developing a big platform. So thanks for joining.
Yeah, it's good to be on it, Drew. I started my content journey about a year ago to the date. It's kind of my 1 year anniversary now.
Is it really? Wow, congratulations. Hey, you put out some interesting stuff, and I think it kind of creates a level of transparency in a way with franchising, which is typically a lot of the information that you put out there and the stories you put out there is behind the veil, behind the scenes. So we can talk a little bit about it, but would love to just kind of hear a little bit about your story and how the idea of the wolf came about and why it came about, like what you're doing with your platform that you're building.
Yeah, definitely. So I worked in franchise development for close to 3 years. And, we worked with a variety of different brands, across different industries. And through that, I kind of just saw time and time again, MultiUnit owners who were doing really well. And to me, that was like a kind of a eureka moment, just discovering like you can just own, 10 franchises of, Orange Theory or Applebee's, whatever. There's so many different franchises out there. And like that's a way to make money, a lot of it. It was pretty eye-opening to me. And I'm entrepreneurial at heart. And, I spend a decent amount of time on Twitter for, following various people of various industries. And no one was talking about franchises at all. And I was just like, this is a legitimate path in entrepreneurship. It's definitely not for everyone, but it should be talked about more. And it should be an option that more entrepreneurs consider, in my opinion. So that was kind of the inspiration for the account. I just thought the whole wolf of franchises would be a fun take on it. And then to just the last thing I'll say on that is I also noticed while doing franchise development that maybe transparency wasn't always at the forefront of what was going on, when it comes to franchise disclosure documents and the numbers being presented to prospective buyers. To me, it's like a super important thing. And it was a little shocking when I first entered the industry to kind of discover like there's people making 6-figure investments, but not necessarily getting any financial intel from the franchisors. I was just like, how is that even allowed? And, I'm aware of all the FTC regulations and all that good stuff. But so for me, it was all about let's bring this transparency to the front and then also just share these cool stories of franchise entrepreneurs.
Yeah, that's awesome. You've done a great job of, everything you put out from your podcast to your great follow on Twitter, the stories that you drop on Saturday nights. I think it's Saturday nights. That's,
Yeah, Sunday morning. Yeah.
Sunday morning. Okay. Yeah. You put out some pretty good stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think like what you nailed is like, there's definitely buying a franchise is a funky thing. Like it is completely unique. And I believe that most people buy franchises the complete wrong way. Like they typically fall in love with this widget. They might be in California and have a pretzel or piece, thing of ice cream and say, oh my God, this is delicious. I need to bring this back to Charlotte, North Carolina. And they just they're in. Like emotionally, they are in. They don't think about the lifestyle reality of what it takes to run that business successfully. The investments, maybe they look at the FDD or maybe the franchise salesperson glosses over the FDD with them, right? And they don't do a deep dive on the numbers and they get into it and it's like, oh, how come I didn't think of this? How come the franchisor didn't tell me that? But at the end of the day, like it's on the buyers to do the research. So I think you're doing a great thing in bringing that level of transparency and putting out the numbers. And, we're kind of limited by the numbers that are in the FDDs for everybody's protection. But, even those a lot of times, like you got to get calibrated on what those numbers are. Like what are some of the things that you've seen, like that you like, or some of the feedback you've gotten from some of your followers that you find people are kind of grasping onto with some of the stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think for one, right? I mean, unless you're within the industry, kind of like we are, like you worked in development before even becoming a broker, and you have the resources, right? Like we know how to find FDDs and they're on state websites. But if you're not in the industry, you're not just going to stumble on those websites from a Google search, right? You do a Google search, you're going to end up on a number of portals, right, that are trying to collect your email and phone number. And then you're getting hit with a barrage of phone calls and emails from a bunch of different sales reps. And before you know it, you're in deep and it's overwhelming. So, with like the newsletter I do, because I'm not like I'm not selling franchises. I just screenshot the item 19 from brands that, I'll only cover brands that I think are showing like potentially be big. And, if they have a decent item 19 with solid economics, that's pretty much what I can go off of. If they don't have an item 19, I don't really know much about it for the most part. So yeah, they've appreciated just getting to see that info because to them, they're not able to. I have tweeted out and put out pieces of content that say like, hey, if you want to look at a bunch of FTDs yourself, go to these websites. But also, right, like that's overwhelming, even if you have access to it. I mean, knowing what an FTD is, how to navigate it, what are the important items, it's a lot to deal with. And yeah, so I think just kind of giving people like signals before they have to dive in further has been really helpful. But yeah, I've also gotten like people who are kind of maybe new to franchises because they've read my content and they're like, oh, this is actually, and especially the podcast, right? The podcast is like where I take the multi-unit owners and I present them to people. It's like, hey, here's a real life example of someone who owns franchises and is doing very well. That's kind of increased the interest from people who otherwise wouldn't have picked franchises. But they're also just like kind of surprised that like, wait, like what's going on in this industry? Like there's no required amount of financial information that has to be put in there. So yeah, it's like a give and a take. There's the people who have been involved and are like, oh, this is cool that you're doing this. And there's the new people who are like, whoa, like this is a crazy world.
Yeah, it's definitely unique. And, we can sit here and talk about FTDs and item 19s, which is, so for anybody who's listening doesn't know what the item 19 is, it's where a franchise company can, and I say the word can because it's completely optional, publish certain financial representation information, but there's no standard to what they have to present other than they have to disclose what they are disclosing, which is a whole nother thing to get into to read the notes and understand exactly what franchise companies are presenting in their item 19s, but it has to be representative. So it's basically the short answer is where you can get a little bit of financial information into, what the unit economics of a franchise, but it still needs to be validated to a great degree by talking to franchise owners. So you've done a great job of just kind of cutting right to it and actually getting, from the trenches voices with the franchisees on your podcast and sharing their stories. And a lot of it's kind of funny because I sit here, people talk about buying franchises every day. And I'm like, look, some of the top franchises are businesses that you're probably going to dismiss on the surface, right? Like you're going to think like, oh my gosh, like, no, there's no way this business makes money. And I want to, go after something I'm super passionate about, quote unquote. But I'm like, that's kind of hard to find. And there's sometimes a different reality, but you've had some folks on, like what brands have you had people on that you were like, man, like I was surprised at how successful this franchisee has been of this brand. Any stick out to you?
So an interesting one I'd say was Anytime Fitness. I had an owner there who built one location, acquired about 8 more. And that's another interesting trend I'm seeing now is the people who are getting into these older systems and just using that network of franchisees to acquire their locations. Kind of like a streamlined approach to the whole entrepreneurship through acquisition playbook. But yeah, Anytime Fitness, I was surprised, admittedly, like, right, I'm more on the younger side, considered a millennial. To me, Anytime Fitness is like an old, dead gym brand. But I'm talking to this owner and they're revamping a bunch of things. They're doing, you still have your big box gym option if you're a member there, but they also are doing like personal training classes. They have an app that like tracks some fitness metrics. And I was just really surprised, honestly, at everything that brand has done to like basically stay modern. And then beyond that, I also had Mathnasium franchisees on who own about 8 locations. And I was actually under the impression that I thought that was a brand for the most part that only allowed single unit ownership. I figured they were recruiting teachers, would take one store and that was kind of their job. And they weren't going to be a teacher in like a high school or something like that anymore. So yeah, that was pretty eye-opening to see that like they have a multi-unit option and, it's a lower investment per store. And right, like it's not going to make as much as an Orange Theory or an Anytime Fitness or other brands on a per unit basis, but like they're profitable and they're right at scale. Like pretty much most franchises at scale with multi-unit ownership, you can make some pretty solid money.
Yeah, I think it's Kumon that might limit the ownership to a single operation or a single franchise. I just know that from my days with Tutor Doctor. But yeah, you get education, fitness. I think you had an automotive guy that on there, right? That's with Midas. Is that right? That's got like 20 some odd locations.
That was a recent one. Yeah, it's got 29 locations. And that's another example, right? So I think his father actually owned some. And that's what kind of like tipped him off to like the whole Midas franchise. But what he's done is he like bought a franchise from his father. Like he took one off of his portfolio because his father had like 6. And he's done exactly what I mentioned before, which is basically he operates the first couple that he got into. He does a very good job. He's done a very strategic approach of networking with a lot of the franchisees and just getting his name out there so they know him. And he always is reaching out to them saying, hey, like, especially, I mean, he specifically targets the older ones. He'll say, hey, like, we're looking to acquire more. If you're ever looking to sell, please reach out. And that's how he's gotten it effectively from, 3 locations to 29 today. And it's just a really smart strategy if you think about it, is targeting an old brand that has, 1,000+ locations so that it's a robust system. You're not like betting on an emerging brand. You kind of are, it's a household name brand already, which I would say Midas definitely is. But then knowing that they have franchise owners in that system who have been there for a while and are on their way out, right? And that's what this person's done. He's in his probably low 30s and he's already at 29 locations. So I just thought that was a really cool strategy that can be definitely done with other brands besides Midas.
Yeah. No, 29 scaling to that fast. I mean, it's funny because you don't always hear about franchise resales because a lot of them don't make it to the market, right? They don't get listed with a broker. They don't hit biz, buy, sell. If you can get in with a franchise that actually is growing in terms of number of locations or already has a lot of locations, like there's this whole economic ecosystem inside these brands that transactions and all kinds of stuff takes place that most people never hear about. And it's good. Like if you figure out deals that are win-wins, like, the seller can avoid having to deal with the business brokers and all these third-party people that don't understand the business. Like, they can sell it to somebody who already understands the business, knows how to size up their business to figure out if it's a fit, try to get a deal done. And I did that. I bought a franchise and the first person I went to sell it to was my neighbor, and it worked. It was super because I knew he wanted it and I wanted to sell. So it's, it's super, but there's a little bit of art that goes into like kind of making those deals. I can tell people like one of the big things, like when they're buying a franchise agreement, the transfer fees is a big thing to look at, because down the line, if you are planning to scale to multiple locations, and let me disclaim this by saying I'm not an attorney and you're not an attorney, so we are not giving legal advice, but you want to look at how those transfer fees are structured. Like if you're going to sell, if you have 5 locations open and you're going to sell to one buyer, you should only have to pay 1 transfer fee. You should not have to pay 5 transfer fees on top of whatever else, because it's one buyer. It shouldn't take the franchisor much more to help whatever they need to do document that transfer. So
absolutely. Yeah. And I just think too, right, if you're a business owner, you're going to do an off-market deal. I mean, typically for most owners, right? I mean, you only selling a business isn't something that you're doing often. It's not like a once a month activity for most small business owners, just franchises or not, right? It's a once in a lifetime activity. They don't know what to do. I've really dove into this world too, just because it's been interesting to me, and seeing like the value of a broker that some people might just see the commission they're taking. But the reality is like the good brokers know how to package up a business and take the financials, present it in a way they can get your business sold. It's a major process, but that's why, right, when the franchise stays in the system, like the resales, the franchisees can speak the same language. And, the Midas franchisee, Brian, who I had on my podcast, right? I mean, he says, he's like, I can know within 10 seconds by looking at their numbers, if it's performing well or not, because he just knows that business and their model inside and out. So yeah, I do just think it's a much more efficient transaction if you can keep it internal.
Yeah, no doubt. I think too, like a lot of the theme that you see of like successful multi-unit franchisees, and I'd love to get your take on this with the folks that you've gotten to know through your platform, is, they're always looking out ahead. Like they're not in the weeds of the day-to-day stuff. Like they know how to recruit, they know how to manage, and they know how to lead a team very, very well. And they're always, if it's a multi-unit franchisee that's on their single location, they're looking at real estate. Where's their second and third location going to be, and stuff like that. But are there other things that you've seen from some of the multi-unit franchisees that you've interviewed that you kind of picked up on their mindset and kind of how they go about scaling to multiple locations?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say one is just like the top ones are all really good at selling, right? And if you think about it, like every position is effectively selling. So they have to sell to get like customers in the door. If you're hiring someone, you're selling them on why you should be working for them. And so, yeah, they're just able to just, really communicate a vision to their employees that keeps them on board. And as they scale, right, making sure that vision stays intact. Especially like, Jamie Weeks is the one that stands out for me, who owns 140 Orange Theories. And, he said they got up to like 300 plus employees and he was still able to keep in touch with every single one. I don't even know how that's possible. But it was impressive. And he did admit, like, at a certain point, it was just impossible. I think that was at like 12 or so locations was when he like tapped out and couldn't stay in touch with every individual employee. But yeah, I mean, these folks are just incredible sellers at every aspect of the business. So they're able to wear a lot of hats. And yeah, I mean, they're also very financially savvy. And this is why, like, when I think of multi-unit ownership, it's not for everyone, because negotiate multiple leases, have however many employees are required, and it definitely differs by brand. Some are more labor intensive, but just managing it all, like organizationally, like that's a challenge. And you're the one who has to do it all. The franchisor's support only goes so far. So you got to keep your books clean, and if you can't do that, you got to outsource it. You got to scale your marketing. I remember speaking to an F45 owner in Ireland on the podcast, and, he got to a point where it was just, I think it was 3 locations in, and he hadn't outsourced any of his marketing or anything like that. And so every location he added, it was just either double the work or triple the work. But he eventually got to a point where, like, the cash flow allowed him to then outsource it to the system as a whole. So yeah, just being able to figure out those problems without, like letting things collapse is something that all these owners are able to figure out.
Yeah. And they seem to have like tips and tricks and ways to, cut right to it, right? Like they know the 20% of their business that drives 80% of the results, and they know how to quickly get a pulse in that business. Like I think it was the Jamie Weeks episode, and this has stuck with me. The 3 questions that he asks people that he's hiring. And I mean, this guy's hiring, because I mean, hiring to scale Orange Theory and scale kind of any business, like hiring people is a massive piece of that thing. So you have to kind of figure out efficient ways to do it. And do you remember what the 3 questions were?
I do. It was hilarious because that's the only time I've been interviewing someone on a podcast, and they flip it on me, and all of a sudden I was like, wait, you're interviewing me now?
Yeah.
It was hilarious. So I went with it. But yeah, so it's what was your first concert that you ever went to? What was the first car you ever had? And if you could only watch one movie for the rest of your life, what would it be? That's what he asked every employee. And he says it's like he doesn't want it to be an interview. He wants it to he just wants to know someone's story, and that helps inform him if they're going to be a good hire and a good fit for his organization.
Yeah, from a culture standpoint, right? Like
yeah,
especially the movie question. I think, because he talked about like if somebody names some boring movie, he's like, I don't know if you're going to be a fit into this fun people-oriented culture, right? That's what they need to have at Orange Theory. So I thought those 3 questions, man. But I have a master's degree in human resources, so it's like the complete opposite of that, but it's so true. Because, with those 3 questions, you get the conversation going, person starts talking, there's other stuff that you can use to kind of get the conversation, take it different ways, but you also get a lot of insight into just kind of where they are in their life and, if it's going to be a fit for operation.
I think it's fascinating that he does that. And I get it, because like culture is most important for him. And I mean, it's part as someone who would, if I'm getting interviewed, I'd prefer those kinds of questions, right? Then kind of there's like the cookie cutter interview questions, like, can you give me a time when you made a mistake and how you learned from it? Like, just those things. It's like, I don't know, Jamie found a way to really get the heart of a person. But yeah, just the last thing I'd say too on these multi-unit franchisees, right, is if I was entering a franchise system, just after getting able to interview some of the top ones in respective systems, like in Orange Theory with Jamie, right? If I bought into a franchise today, I would be looking at who are the top 5 franchisees, and I need to like become their friend. I need to be a partner, like find a way for them to mentor me, because, you want to replicate really what they've done. And the reality is, especially, the bigger a franchise grows, there's going to be some disparities in performance. And the ones who are doing well, like there's a reason for it. Sometimes, right, it's luck. I've talked to some franchisees who are like, yeah, like this is our first location and it's crushing it. It just so happens that locally, they have like XYZ reasons why they think that one outperforms on average every other location in the system. But, for the most part, right, I mean, the top owners are the top owners for a reason. So I would try to become their friend as fast as possible. Yeah,
that is such sage advice, because I know people that are happy to pay the royalty, which candidly, like after 5 to 7 years of you've been operating the business, like, the royalty can feel a little bit like a tax in a way, because you've learned the business. Like you don't feel like you need corporate anymore, and corporate might not be giving you as much support or whatever it is, but they're happy to pay it because they get access to people, other franchisees, other multi-unit franchisees that they can compare notes with, pick up the phone, call them, ask them a question. And that question, the answer that they give them could save them tens of thousands of dollars or help them make hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? Just by being able to cut right to it. So like, what you said, like, I'm going to ask you, a question about like what you would be looking for in buying a franchise based on, everything. And do you own any franchises?
No, I was very close to it before I ended up, and we can talk about this if you want, but before I ended up partnering with Workweek on my content, I was looking at a franchise, a coder school, actually. And yeah, Workweek came into the picture, showed me their vision and how they could help with content and things we can do in the franchise industry. And so for now, I'm full-time kind of with my newsletter, podcast, et cetera.
For sure. Yeah, I know you've amassed how many followers do you have now on Twitter? 40,000 or something?
I'm a little over 50,000 right now.
Yeah, and it's kind of starting to like exponentially compound a little bit, isn't it?
Yeah, it's cool, honestly. It's like a real life example of just like compounding, right? Because as your following grows, it just becomes easier to reach more and more people and your content gets shared more naturally. So yeah, like it does get easier over time. It's like building that foundation. I mean, I grinded for like 9 months straight and I, got like a couple thousand followers and then I had one viral tweet about Quiznos of all franchises. And yeah, it's like, so just to paint a picture for folks for the content side, because I think a lot of people see it and they're like, oh, that looks awesome. It's fun. And like follower counts are such a superficial vanity metric that I feel like naturally, and I've fallen into this trap before too. Like I'd say, oh, I want to do that. I want to have a lot of followers. But it took me 9 months to get like 4,000 followers. And then that was this past March. So like early March, I was at about 4,000 followers. And then I had that viral tweet about Quiznos. And now it's, we're recording on July 5th and I have 51,000 plus followers. So, right. I mean, that's like a 3 or 4 month time where I've gained 46,000 followers. But if I quit at any point before that, like none of this is happening. I'm not on your podcast right now. So yeah, content's a long game. You got to be in it and stay committed. And if that tweet doesn't go viral, maybe it takes me another 9 months to like really pop. You just don't know.
Yeah. It took persistence to stick with it and delayed gratification, I'm sure.
That's the words, man. Delayed gratification. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's not easy, but you figured it out, Yeah. You probably knew at some point you were going to figure it out, right? Like don't know how, don't know where, but like you're working at this thing, you're getting better, you're getting smarter, you're getting wiser at some point. So where did the idea for the Quizno tweet come from?
So I've realized, like the newsletter is really the bigger focus because that's actually monetizable, right? I mean, I've been obsessed with the newsletter business model for a while. And this goes back to like, I am like generally entrepreneurial. Obviously, I'm very focused on franchises and all my content is, but I do just love reading about other businesses and different things. And I kind of fell in love with Morning Brew and The Hustle, which are two like businessy and startup news oriented newsletters. And right, they're written in a very casual tone. So that's kind of what why I gravitated towards them. But so they end up both getting acquired. I think Morning Brew got acquired for like $75 million and The Hustle for $20 million. And that just blew my mind. I was like, okay, so newsletters, like people may look at them and think like, this is just another email that I'm getting, but like, it's actually a real legit business at the other end of it. So when it comes to, the newsletter, it's more detailed. And I realized Twitter can be like my top of funnel that will drive to the newsletter, but I had to really broaden that content scope out to make it interesting to more people. Because the reality is, right, I'm sure you know this, right? Who people want to buy a franchise is it's not that many. Like I think there was like 15,000 franchise purchases a year on average. And the data industry is tough to find. But the point is there's not that many people actually buying franchises every year. So when it came to Quiznos, I was just like, all right, let's just find cool stories within these big franchise brands that like everyone knows of, right? Everyone knows McDonald's, Burger King. Quiznos at one point was huge. And they had that hilarious commercial that aired during the Super Bowl in like the early 2000s. And I was like, all right, this is a crazy story because they went up to 5,000 locations and now they crashed down to 200-ish. Like, right, that's an epic collapse story.
Crazy.
Yeah, so I was just like, let's just give this a go. And, I had that was like my fourth or fifth thread that I'd been dropping on a Sunday that was of like more mainstream franchise topics. And yeah, I don't really know why. I mean, it just sometimes you get lucky with the algorithm. I don't really know, but it popped and growing from that point forward has been a lot easier.
Yeah, could be because I mean, Quiznos is still a household name. Like people know who Quiznos is, right? And the people were probably like, I never realized that happened, or I wonder what happened to it. And
that was it. It was like it like tapped into nostalgia. But that was one of my takeaways was that people still love Quiznos. The amount of retweets and mentions I just got, in the replies of people saying like, damn, forgot about Quiznos, but really loved, this sandwich from them. Wish they were around and not Subway. Like it turned into like I wish Quiznos could replace Subways in the replies. And I just thought it was funny because I didn't realize that many people still loved Quiznos. But yeah, I mean, there's still potential for them. I don't know if they ever saw it, but maybe they could there's people who want Quiznos for sure.
Yeah, it's better than Subway. It's not a bad sandwich. It's not a terrible sandwich. And I think I mentioned I grew up in Philly. We're used to hoagies, and I live down in Charlotte, North Carolina, and my best hoagies, Jersey Mike's. But whatever, they give decent bread. But Quiznos is not a bad sandwich. So what was it from the tweet? I'm curious. What was it that led to Quiznos' downfall?
Well, so I mean, they really just lost the plot. Look, I'm capitalistically driven. Like I do want to make money and have a good life. So I don't know what it would feel like to be in the position of like the CEO and the owner of Quiznos to see your franchise taking off and the amount of money they're probably making from royalties. And Quiznos specifically started their own supplier for the food and paper products. It was called, I forget the name, they named it. It was like literally a separate entity, but they required all their franchisees to buy those products through them. And they were not charging them like fair prices. They realized quickly that they could make way more money off supplying their franchisees with product than they were even making off their royalties. So they put a lot of focus there. But then they also were just saying, let's just get as many sales now through our units, because that's going to require franchisees to keep buying more food and more paper products, et cetera. But they were hitting franchisees from both ends. So they're not only with the Z's having to pay more for their supplies, they were also then being mandated to offer, a $5, not a $5 foot long like Subway, but they were getting, so yeah, they had to do very low prices. And so they weren't profitable. And franchisees, obviously, especially after the recession, a lot of them just got, credit limitations tightened completely. And they started closing, and it just created this, as you start closing, there's less brand fund money coming in. Quiznos as a corporate can't do as much for franchisees, and they were already hurting them to begin with. So yeah, lawsuits came piling in, the reputation trashed, and yeah, man, it all just came tumbling down.
It sounds like they lost. I think a guiding principle for a good franchise company is if you focus on your franchisees' happiness and their profitability, and each one's going to be a little different for each person in the system, but as long as people are happy and profitable in their worlds, it's going to be like, you'll be okay. Focus making your money off the royalty. Like get royalty self-sufficient. That is like the first mountaintop to get to. And it takes a long time for a franchise company to get there. But if you can get there and you've got happy and profitable franchisees, like the world is your oyster. And you built a very valuable freaking enterprise that, some private equity company will come around and give you a big pile of cash for.
Exactly. That's the thing that confused me is like, why not? Yes, it's a slower approach and all that. But if you're at the top, I mean, you can still make more money than you need in one lifetime without ripping people off. So why not just do it that way? And, like Subway's had a lot of issues. I don't know what it is with the sub franchise, but right, Subway's had a lot of issues with like not treating their franchisees well and very similar complaints. They've seemed to somehow survive through it all though. And, they have a ridiculous unit count. But yeah, I completely agree. I think profitability at the store level for your franchisees should be first and foremost the focus. And, there's a few franchises that do that really well, but Quiznos was not doing that.
Hey there, it's Drew. Hope you're enjoying the episode so far. Hey, dropping in to mention that if you're thinking about starting a business and curious if there's a franchise out there that's the right fit, I want to help you. I help people find and buy franchises. Whether you're a first-time business owner or a current franchisee thinking about getting into another franchise, I can help you quickly find some of the top emerging franchises in the country that want to expand to your area and then help you figure out if any of them are the right fit. And just like working with a real estate agent, there's no cost to you. If you want to hop on a call to discuss, reach out to me via my website, drewcarpenito.com, and I spell my first name, D-R-U. Just to kind of transition a little bit into social media marketing, because I think that's also kind of has a lot of allure, especially with franchise owners or franchisors listening. You built your audience organically without any paid advertising on your platforms?
So Twitter, yes. The newsletter we've used paid. That's through my partnership with Workweek. So their founding team at Workweek came from The Hustle, who again, I mentioned, acquired for 20 million. And that newsletter had like 2.5 million subscribers, I believe, when it got acquired. And so these people know how to grow newsletters. Like they know, and content is the focus, and they're big believers in like what you can do if you have good content. So, right, it's not like a newsletter where, I'm subscribed to way too many newsletters, but some of them are just every time you get an email, it's them trying to like sell you a product. Like, right, we're actually trying to just create value for the subscribers, and through that, you get more subscribers, right? And with enough eyeballs on anything, you can monetize it through advertising. That's their general thesis, and it starts with good content, right? And yeah, I mean, we've done Facebook and Instagram ads though to get subscribers to that. And we're at like 25,000 plus subs right now.
Wow, that's awesome, man. But it's kind of the same thing to the Quiznos analogy, right? Like you got to put up good content. You have to put up content continually that is meaningful to the audience that you're building. And if you start, as soon as that starts to fade, then your audience is going to get stale pretty quick and probably drop off. So it's, kind of the same guiding principle, to keep it simple, right? Like focus on the things that are going to provide the long-term success. And if you can do that at the franchisor level, it's your franchisees. And at the franchisee level, it's your people. A lot of times it's like, how can you, you got to get the business profitable. You've got to get to a point where you can, afford to pay people. But like, there's a little bit of delayed gratification that typically comes in with building a franchise too. Like you've got to invest and you've got to put out a lot of money. You're going to have a lot of your money going out before you have money coming in. But it's the long game. Like you're not getting into this for short-term cash flow returns. You're getting into this for long-term opportunity, both from the financial standpoint and also from the lifestyle standpoint as well.
You're right. It's like, right. It's delayed gratification across the board. And I mean, honestly, that's probably just the secret to like building any successful venture business, right? I've tried my hand at, hacks, there's all these wealth hacks out there, but the real hack is probably just you have to put in the time and effort, and it's not going to come overnight. That's the hack, which it sucks, but that's the way it is. But what you were saying made me think of I interviewed a Five Guys franchisee. He owns 13 locations today. He actually started as a manager, so that was a really cool story. He just was managing 8 locations for a franchisee, and was like, oh, I can do this on my own. And he didn't have any network, but he hustled his way to raise some money to be able to afford an acquisition of another franchisee. Literally moved his family to go to Arizona where the locations are and acquired 5 at once. So just really inspirational story, I think. But, he owns 13 today. And I remember asking him on the podcast, and he shared it on my podcast. So he's fine. But he's fine with me saying this. He only, he takes about $100,000 salary. So if you think about it though, right? I'm thinking going into that episode, oh, this guy owns 13 Five Guys. Like he's making good money every year. But he's like, no, he's like, I need to like build a reserve of cash. I'm paying off debt covenants, right? Through the lenders that, he's taking on some debt to acquire his locations. And so he's thinking long term. He's like, I'm going to be taking this salary for at least a few more years, if not far more. But he's like, I know that this, portfolio of businesses that I'm building has a ton of value. So he's thinking long term, and he's probably mid 30s. So yeah, you're dead right that like if you want to build a multi-unit organization, you do have to, probably defer some of your own gain for a while for the betterment and for the health of your system.
Yeah, and he probably structured his lifestyle to be able to fit within that 100K, salary. So that's, that's all I needed, right? Or maybe whatever. But yeah, I mean, that's why, a lot of franchise companies, I think they want their franchisees to keep their jobs in the short term, that are like brick and mortar, multi-unit, semi-absentee. Like they want you to keep your job in the short term, if you feel like you have enough bandwidth to be able to pull off both. That's why a lot of times I think you see the advertising, keep your job and, start a franchise. Like one of my buddies owns 15 sport clips. He just bought 10 in the past year from fellow sport clips franchisees here in the Charlotte area. So he had 5 and he kind of built those. I think he built 2, acquired 3, got to 5. And then the neighboring area developer wanted to get out because their kids didn't want to take over the business. So he struck a deal for picking up all 10 of them. He still has a W-2 job with a big corporation.
Oh, that's incredible. That's really impressive.
Yeah.
I'm surprised he's able to do that all, honestly. I feel like I've noticed with the guests I've had where after a certain point, they get to a certain scale, they just dive in full time. But I guess, right, if you can do it all, why not? I mean, it's more cash for him. But that's also just like another example, right, of owners of these bigger systems, right? That's pretty much how it goes. If they don't have kids that are going to take it over, it's like, oh, got to sell. And it's a lot easier for them to sell to another owner. So good for him for being opportunistic.
He told me he planted the seed with the franchisee that he ended up buying out about a year ago. He was like, hey, if you're ever thinking about selling, I'd be interested in having a conversation with you. And that seed, it's like the movie Inception, right? It grew and grew and grew, and then found out the kids didn't want to take it over, and he was the first call, and they struck a deal.
Amazing. Yeah, that's awesome. That's a good brand too, from what I've heard. I spoke to, back in my development days, but 14 unit owner in the tri-state area, and he seemed very happy. So I've heard only good things from that brand.
Yeah, I think it's one of those, like, you're not going to get rich off one, but if you can, rinse and repeat to multiples, like, the opportunity can get pretty significant. And, he's got, he told me he's got one district manager that doubles as a manager at one store and is also a district manager for every three. So he's kind of got, so he's got 5 kind of DMs that are also overseeing one of his stores. It's a career path for them, in that world to cut hair as much.
Yeah, I've just started. I have this idea I'm going to do a deep dive in one of my newsletters on really the benefits of multi-unit ownership. And that's actually part of it. What you just touched on is, I think, and this is the piece is like a reaction actually to, I think we over glorify the local mom and pop small business owner. And what I mean by that is like, don't get me wrong, I have tons of admiration for any entrepreneur, but should we it seems that once someone becomes more successful, when they're not stuck in one location working and grinding in their same store every single day, once they get a couple and they get some financial freedom for themselves and they start benefiting from the fruits of their labor, that's when people start kind of writing it off, I don't want to go to them. I'm going to shop local. It's like, all right, well, that's just a local business owner that became more successful. What's wrong with that? And also, right, the follow-through effects are to the employees, because just like as you said, as a multi-unit owner grows and they have more locations, possibly I've seen multi-unit owners with multiple brands where employees switch from brand to brand. So it gives them more growth opportunities and more options. But it's better for the employees, is what my ultimate point is that the bigger the multi-unit owner, they should be providing more benefits, can be able to afford higher rates. And again, more growth opportunities if there's multiple brands, or you're even just rising up through a system and going from employee to manager to maybe district manager. I've even seen multi-unit owners then help those managers become franchisees of other brands because they trust, so one will provide the capital, the manager provides the sweat equity and gets to earn into ownership. So I just think, that's another, it's not as talked about. It is the follow-through effects of multi-unit ownership that when done right, it actually is beneficial for everyone overall.
Yeah. People want to be a part of something, right? It's not just about a paycheck. It's about being a part of something that's going somewhere too, right? It's, somebody's cast the vision and the employees can latch onto it and believe it and see it, happening. It's going to take time, but I think people want to be a part of something. And with the right leader that has the charisma and has the ability to communicate, have a vision and communicate a vision, then, pretty powerful. But why do you think that owners that, work in the business are the face of the business, customers get to know them, and then they end up growing their business to a point where they take a little bit of a back seat and get to enjoy some of their benefits? Why do you think it is that customers tend to, look at that some customers look at that in a potential negative way?
I mean, it probably varies, right? I mean, there could be, and this is probably true sometimes, right? That maybe as the organization scales, right? If it's the owner in the store, they just naturally, they have way more skin in the game. They're more passionate about it. They care and work harder probably than your average employee, because again, it's their investment on the line. So perhaps maybe customer service dips sometimes. And that's when people realize, right, if you're not getting good service as a customer, it's really easy to complain. So that's probably part of it, but I'm not really sure, honestly, because to me it is, you've probably seen this, even the treatment of franchise owners, as some people don't count them as small business, as local small business owners, because their business is attached to this larger corporation potentially. And even that though, obviously I'm biased, right, being in the franchise content game, but the reality is a franchise owner is just a small business owner who took a different path. If you own one franchise, right, if you're going to start a coffee shop, you can buy Dunkin' Donuts or you can start, Wolf's Coffee brand. I don't think they should be treated differently just because one's paying royalties versus the other. I get why, if you're a McDonald's owner, right, a national brand, why people are never going to look at you the same as the local burger joint. That's just, it's just too big of a brand at this point to be treated the same. But a lot of times with the emerging brands, I don't think they should be treated differently. I don't know why. And I've never actually spoken. I'm seeing this more from like, sometimes you see it on Twitter or LinkedIn, right? Just kind of the shop local. And I don't get involved in these things personally, but you see the debates happen in the comments, and I'm like, I think people maybe should just treat them all equally, but it is what it is.
Yeah. If you have your own federal tax ID number, you are a small business owner. I don't care what type of business you have. You are paying the taxes and getting the benefits and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think the brand, right, is that's where brand can be powerful, and provide that advantage over the local operators that just don't have that piece in their business. But yeah, I think you nailed it. Like, I think a lot of people from an ego standpoint like to say, hey, the owner served me, or, I got this bread directly from the owner and they had their touch on it. But at the end of the day, it comes down to customer service, right? So if you can, as the owner, if you can empower and bring in people that can give better customer service than maybe you were, like, I think customers wouldn't miss a beat. It's just maybe there's not as much room for error as there was before.
Yeah, I'd agree with that completely. And yeah, just the last thing I want to say, and again, I'm early in like formulating this content piece that's going to be in a newsletter, but I get that, there's a lot of people who say like America's built in the back of small business owners, which is true, right? Like the number of small business owners and what they contribute to GDP is like astronomical. I should pull the stat. But my thing is like, and I'm not saying this across the board. I'm sure there's some small business owners who they have their one store, one shop, one restaurant, whatever the industry is, and they love working in it. They don't want to do anything else. I'm sure those people exist. But I would also argue that there's a large number of small business owners who are stuck in working in the business, and right, they become stuck in it where they have to work in 5, 6, 7 days a week. They don't take many vacations. And I've met some of these people in different industries, right? Like, should we glorify that mom and pop owner versus just, promote more of an aspirational goal that like, yeah, you should try to get to multi-unit ownership because you as the owner want to free up your time and enjoy your life more. Like, just as that's my general like high level point, right? Is like, that shouldn't be villainized. That should be celebrated. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think like the word lifestyle is something you don't really hear anybody really talk about. Like there's the personal development people like Tony Robbins, and you got Gerber doing the work on your business, not in your business, and traction, and with all that stuff, right? But like, it comes down to like, I think, and Van Horn is probably one of the biggest voices on lifestyle that I've ever experienced in my life, and he's influenced me a lot of times to think about it, because nobody ever really talks about like, hey, it's not the money's the money, but what do you want from a lifestyle? What do you want your lifestyle to look like? And it's an interesting thing to think about.
Well, I mean, I just had Eric on my podcast, and I was shocked. I got to it at the end of the conversation because he was bringing it up, and I was like, hey, can you just walk me through your schedule? Like, keep talking about it. And yeah, I mean, he works like 3 days a week, 15 hours total a week. And the rest, he's like, yeah, I play, I go mountain biking. I hang out with my wife. We do a lunch date at, every Monday or whatever. And he's like, Mondays is an off day for him. Like, he doesn't work Mondays at all. What most people's Sundays are his Monday. So yeah, I was like, wow, you have a great life. And like, he lives out in like North Dakota or something.
Yeah, South Dakota.
Maybe South Dakota. Yeah. And he's got like a big ranch, and it's like, damn, like, what am I doing in Manhattan?
Yeah. Well, he's got a good team. Like, he's got this niche because he used to be a colleague of mine at Franchoice, and I got to know him pretty well through that. And he was very successful doing this. But he only worked, he said he only worked a couple hours a week doing this, which a hard time sometimes to believe him, but he's done a good job with his masterminds to bring in a team of, like, figure out what it takes to operate those things, bring in a small team of people, or even subcontractors, and get it to the point where he can focus on the things that make that thing go, and not get stuck in the weeds of the posting his pictures of his ducks on social media, or whatever he does, type of thing. So the art of scaling a business is, even franchise companies don't give you that playbook. There's been a few that do have the playbook for multi-unit like scaling, but there's not many that do. I think Exponential Fitness is one that, like, they have specifically geared their system to be like, hey, we want to partner with people that are comfortable running these semi-absentee and want to expand multiple locations.
Yeah.
but there's not a lot of them.
Well, that's actually a little bit of my beef too, that I haven't really shown through the content yet, through the Wolf. But I think there's kind of this BS narrative that comes from a lot of franchisors, honestly, that is, we only want, passionate owners who only want to own one location and like work in the business. And like, I'm like, okay, great. That works really well for you as the Zor who's going to be collecting all the royalties and you're going to get rich. But like, I don't think it's fair or reasonable necessarily for like to expect that people should want to stop at one, right? Because like, let's be honest. I mean, I think you said it earlier. 99% of franchises, you're not going to get rich from only one location. Just a fact. Like even McDonald's, you own one, you're probably making 250 to 350,000 in EBITDA a year. Which don't get me wrong, that's great income, well above the average in America. But you're still not rich, like per se. That's McDonald's we're talking about. So I just think it should be geared to like, hey, this can be. I mean, you can't project and say you're going to be, if you join our franchise, you're going to get rich or anything like that or become wealthy. But I just think that it should be a little bit more reasonable, where it's like, hey, like, yeah, you can own multiple locations. We want you to financially succeed and be comfortable. But the whole single unit ownership, I mean, for 99% of brands, that's kind of like handcuffs right there, if you ask me.
Well, and then you also, you have some, then, kind of the other thing to watch out for when you're buying a franchise is, there's some FSOs out there that, some emerging franchise brands bring in FSOs, which are franchise sales organizations, and the FSO gets paid when they sell multiple locations. But the question is, are the FSO and are that franchise company 100% aligned in terms of bringing on the right people to truly open and grow into the amount of licenses that they're buying up front because they get a little bit of a discount. It's been kind of interesting.
There's a lot of different models of FSOs that, and I used to work at one. We took a percentage of the royalties, and the thought there, which I've gone back and forth on this, now I'm pretty solid in my thinking on it. I'm curious, I want you to be honest with me. I think if you're an FSO, I think taking royalties is actually a good thing. There's a limit to it, but my thoughts behind that are this. If you're an FSO and you partner with an emerging brand that doesn't know anything about franchising and you sell hundreds of units for them, let's just call it 200 or 300. I mean, that's an insane amount of economic value that you just created for a company. So I would think it's unfair if the FSO doesn't get to share in the upside in some way. So whether it's equity or royalties, that's kind of the only levers you have to pull. That's why. So yeah, I think that's fine. But it also, that aligns incentives if you have something like equity or royalties as part of the compensation, because if it's purely taking a cut of the franchise fees, you might start to stop caring about the quality of the Z's that you're bringing in for a brand. But if you have a royalty stake at hand, then it's like, okay, we really want their brand to succeed because that actually financially helps us as well.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways to look at it. I think it's so much of it. I don't know if it's a one size fits all answer for every franchise company because depends on how they're capitalized and because it's they need to be properly capitalized to be able to because it's the long game they're playing and young franchise companies can't afford to bring on the talent on the FD side because I mean a lot of times I'd say not all the time but it's just difficult because a good you've seen it like. You can have the most amazing franchise concept in the world, prints money, whatever the quote unquote semi-absentee ownership, but they hire a bad salesperson and that brand never goes anywhere.
Yeah.
Like it just doesn't go because the salespeople, I mean, you're talking to two FD guys here, but like, I do believe this, like who you bring on to represent you, whether it's an employee or an FSO is like such an important piece of the engine that can make a brand go. And it's something to look at. Whenever you're looking at buying a franchise is who's selling them.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And even if there's emerging Zors out there or businesses listening to this that are thinking of getting into franchising, I mean, it's basically like starting a second business. And I don't think people realize that, right? Because I mean, the skill set and the set of resources franchise development takes is wildly different than whatever it takes to run the actual business itself. So, right, if you're a 5 location taco shop, the owner and founder of that, it's way different. They're probably good at running a restaurant. They have a good recipe. They have culinary skills. Maybe they know how to hire shift workers and all that. But finding franchisees, knowing where to market to find them, how to allocate your marketing budget, what tech stack to use for your sales process, guiding candidates through a 3 to 6 month cycle of trying to basically convince them to spend six figures on your franchise, right? I mean, those are totally different worlds that we're operating.
Oh, yeah.
And so like, I completely agree that the salesperson or the sales organization that you work with makes a world of difference.
Yeah, because it's almost like a third, you nailed it. Like it's a completely different operation. It's almost like a third business, because even when you just start to franchise your business, that's a completely different ballgame than what you've been used to operate your brand. Like learning and helping people replicate your success.
That too. Yeah, there's the whole support side that I didn't even touch on. They're selling it and then supporting it.
Right. And it ain't, here's a 1,000-page operations manual. Good luck. It's like truly helping people, and every franchisee is going to need a differing amount of help. Like it's not a one size fits all piece of it. I think honestly, like it's easier to get the franchise sales piece right than it is to get the franchise ops piece right. And I think there's just less talent, on the ops side, because a lot of the talent gravitates its way to the dev side because the money's better, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
If you can franchise, and we did this at AdvantaClean way back when, like we franchised with the people we had that had been with the company for 10 plus years. And we just said, hey, Jeff Duden, he's the founder, and probably not the textbook way of doing it, but it took a little bit longer, but like we all knew how to operate different parts of the business, and it made the support a lot easier for us. And it also just kind of helped us cut right to it versus, hiring some quote unquote ops person that didn't know the business and was trying to learn it and then also help other people learn it. Like I've seen a lot of franchise companies try that and it just doesn't go well.
Yeah, that's interesting. All the brands I've worked with for the most part, that their ops were people who grew internally, just from getting hired well before maybe there was even a franchise plan in the roadmap. So ideally, right, that's probably the golden scenario, because if you bring someone in, no matter what their experience is at brand XYZ, it could just be totally different and not as valuable, right? So I think that's a good lesson there. It's like just believing in your people. Because I have seen people step into the franchise world and then they're kind of thinking and like looking at titles and people's experience, and they're gravitating towards, the stars of the industry, so to speak. Whereas you might have the best people might be right there already at your company. So yeah, definitely don't doubt potentially your own people. That's what I would say there.
And keep it simple. Like again, just if you can focus on your franchisees' happiness and their success, just focus on those two things, whatever it takes. And then eventually you get to like a critical mass where the franchisees start supporting other franchisees, and you have this culture. And because if the more and more people that are successful, the easier it gets. Cool. All right, I've been dying to ask you this question. I'm going to put you on the spot. So with everything that you've learned over the past, your years in franchising, but really like you've become a student in a way of franchising for the past year, doing everything that you're doing. I'm curious, like if there are certain elements or certain like indicators or things that have started to kind of stand out to you about like if you were to buy a franchise, like are there certain things that you that you would look for to figure out if determine if it's a good brand, number one, and then number two, if it's the right fit for you?
Yeah, I guess, for one, right, unit economics, which that sounds obvious possibly, but you said this at the very beginning. Some people get like they taste a product at a brand like, oh, I got to bring this back to my hometown. Like that's not a good way to look at what franchise to pick. Like sure, you might be passionate and really love the product that you're selling, but if it's not a good business, as an entrepreneur, do you really want to try to replicate an unprofitable business, or not even unprofitable, just maybe a mediocre investment where you're shelling out 300 to 600 grand and the top performers making 75 grand in EBITDA? Like that's going to take a while to make your money back or just pay off, whatever financing you're possibly able to get. So yeah, I'd say unit economics at the store level. Also, the industry matters a ton, right? Like Orange Theory has been incredible. Same as F45. They basically were both founded around 2010. And here we are, in 2022, F45 is a public company on the New York Stock Exchange. Orange Theory is still private, but like 1,200 plus locations, like massive private equity buyouts and recapitalizations there. So they've been incredible. And like I've spoken to franchisees at both brands. I have yet to find one who isn't incredibly happy and isn't doing very well for themselves. But that said, like boutique fitness is saturated, right? Like Exponential Fitness has like 12 different concepts, all specifically targeted at like one area of working out. There's new boutique fitness concepts coming out all the time. I'm not saying like I would be worried if I'm an Orange Theory franchisee or F45 franchisee, but the reality is like I don't know where they're going to be in 10 years. Whereas other industries, they have longevity, and like the pet industry is probably a good example of that, where COVID has actually been, produced a great tailwind for that industry with pandemic puppies and all that stuff. And like the demand for like the services that pets need, they're going to stick around for the lifetime those pets are around. But people's like fitness habits, I feel like that's a little bit subject to trendiness and things like that. So I would focus a lot on the industry as well. But if you have a good concept in an industry that like you can trust is reliable, or like the pet industry is on the right side, a boom, right? Like where it's early innings and it's probably only going to keep getting bigger and bigger. To me, like those are the most important things. And then from there, you can get pretty granular on a brand level, where like what kind of technology are they using, what kind of marketing support do they have, and like Crumble Cookies. If someone follows me, is listening to this, and they follow me, they know I'm obsessed with it because I tweet about them a lot. I mean, they've been incredible. Like, right, they have like 5 or 6 million social media followers across their platform. They have their own proprietary tech stack built out from the point of sale system at their stores and for franchisees to communicate. Like, they're a modern franchise. And so those are the things I'm looking at when you really like start to get granular with like the systems they have in place.
And I think like, like they're a unicorn brand, right? Orange Theory, unicorn brand. Like, there's these brands every few years that come about, and I call them unicorns, but it doesn't happen every year. But yeah, I mean, it's fun to see. I think Restore Hyper Wellness is the next one. That's the one that nobody's really talking about, except they were just on the cover of Franchise Times, but they grew to like 900 units in development over the past 2 years, and nobody's really talking about it. It's insane.
Put that on my radar. Yeah. Well, I know, I think Level 5 Capital has an investment in that.
Took a minority position early on. They knew they had something. And then, I know the guys at Level 5, they helped make it go. They kind of helped, I think Restore kind of figured, they knew they were onto something. And then they wisely partnered with Level 5, who kind of helped them just kind of streamline like a lot of the stuff. And then boom, it went exponential growth, hockey stick growth, like crazy, crazy growth. And people think that's hocus pocus, but these guys figured something out.
No, I mean, the reality is like you said, I mean, there's a few brands, and like the Orange Theories, the Crumbles, they are the exception, not the rule. I mean, because there's like 4,000 plus franchises. The large, like 98% of them don't do what Orange Theory or Crumble or Restore has done. It's usually a slog. It's hard to grow. It's hard to find franchisees. Even growing 10 plus units a year, I think as a franchisor, that's a great thing. And you look at the biggest franchises today outside of those unicorns that we just talked about. Most of them have been around since like the 60s, 70s, or 80s, which isn't talked about a lot. But like, yeah, McDonald's has been around since like 1956 or something like that.
Good point.
So it takes time is the reality. And that's also just a message for franchisors where I've spoken to franchisors or businesses looking to become a franchise. And like they're ready. They think they're ready at least. And I'll ask about like, their economics, the systems they have in place. And sometimes the feedback is, like we don't really have it dialed in yet. Like we still got to work on X, Y, Z. And in my head, it's just, well, okay, why are you trying to franchise then? Like you're not ready yet. And sometimes you get the answer, oh, well, we could sell this, we could sell anything. But hey, like it's a lot harder than you think. And also, right, I mean, it's not a get rich quick scheme.
No.
Right? Like don't expect to be a Crumble Cookies.
And don't try to be.
Yeah, and don't try to be.
Crumble didn't try to be Crumble. It was kind of like the stars aligned, right place, right time. And then it sounds like they made the right investments. Like they made the right moves as they started to grow. I know we're kind of getting up here on time, but can you give us have you released that thread yet on Twitter? Is that an upcoming one on Crumble?
I did a thread on Crumble. Yeah, like probably a few months ago at this point. It's funny. They're not actually, because I mean, they've sort of grown from like west to east. And I know they're based in Utah, but I know that like, I think most of the country, like 90% of the country sold out at this point, but some people hadn't even heard of them. Whereas others were like, oh my God, I love those cookies. Or, oh, like I've just seen them on TikTok because like Crumble is apparently incredible on TikTok. But yeah, I did drop that thread just kind of on their rise. And to me, like the most eye-popping thing is just they've been able to grow this quickly and their franchisees are still crushing it. Like in their item 19, you see, I think for their most recent FTD, they based this off of 120 plus franchisees and the average net income was 357,000 or like a little over. So like per unit, I mean, that's like ridiculous return considering the high end of the investment is like 690K. So yeah, to be able to grow at that pace and still maintain EBITDA that high for franchisees, it's just like amazing.
Cookies, selling cookies, right?
Well, do you think it's a fad? Because I got a lot of feedback like, oh, it's a fad. Like they're going to be the next frozen yogurt franchise. And I actually push back. I don't think so. Because I think cookies are just like, Froyo's was a fad. Like no one really cares that much about frozen yogurt, but like Mrs. Fields, Nestle, like there's cookie brands that
Cookies ain't going anywhere.
exactly.
I remember they opened a Tiff's Treats around the corner from where I am, which is kind of a non-franchised competitor from what I've been able to tell. But I remember when they opened up, they were giving away free cookies, one cookie per person. And it's a small, like 800 square foot, like inline, like not a great location. They had people camped out there for 24 hours waiting to get one free freaking cookie. I was like, what the heck? It's like, go just, $5. Just, wait until a day or two. Yeah. I think America, we just love our cookies and they are good.
Yeah. And they started, they have ice cream now at their stores. So if they like are using cookies as like a wedge to get into like a more, it's like a double-edged sword. It's like could that lose focus from their core product that's killing it? Or is it like they're going to bring in additional revenue stream that's actually just a net positive as the whole? And right, if they become like, you can now do an ice cream sandwich with all your cookies, I could see it crushing it. And then it's like a legitimate, just national dessert brand and, the modern day, I don't know, Cold Stone or Dairy Queen or whatever.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing, man. It is fun to watch. Yeah, it's cool to see. Cool, man. Well, the Wolf, appreciate it, man. So where can people follow your wisdom and all the fun stuff you put out?
I'm most active on Twitter at Franchise Wolf. I'm going to start posting on LinkedIn, trying to, talk to and meet some cool people there. But I'd say I have a website, wolfoffranchises.com. That's the best place to find everything from the podcast, Franchise Empires, to the newsletter, Twitter, social accounts. You can find everything at wolfoffranchises.com.
All right. Wolfoffranchises.com. Get on his newsletter. It's good. I'm on it. It's informative. Well, the Wolf, I appreciate it, my man. Thank you.
Yeah, this was fun, Drew. Thanks for having me on.
That's a wrap. Hope you found a nugget or two in there that can help you on your franchise journey. And if you ever want to talk franchising, reach out to me anytime.